You don't realize someone mattered until the silence around them makes you listen. Let us know in the comments below. Have you ever seen someone underestimated, only for the truth to shut everyone up? Kyle Brewster liked the sound of his own voice, especially when it echoed off marble floors and bounced back with applause. He didn't need a microphone to own a room. His confidence was loud enough. Decked out in a crisp designer tux with a tie slightly loosened for flair, he stalked through the lobby of the Montgomery Civic Center like he'd bought it. Technically, he hadn't, but his father had donated 6 figures to tonight's Veterans Leadership Gala, so Kyle felt entitled to something close. God, do they just let anyone in here? He muttered, eyes narrowing as he passed a hunched man in a ragged olive coat near the back wall. The man didn't meet his gaze, didn't even look up. I scoffed. "Look at this guy. Bet he wandered in off the street," he said loud enough for the surrounding staff to hear. A few chuckled. 1 or 2 looked uneasy. Rachel Whitman overheard him as she made her way across the foyer, her name badge glinting under the recessed lighting. Director of Community Engagement. She had seen Kyle before, always floating around the events his father funded, always with the same smirk. She wasn't in the mood tonight. "Kyle," she said, stopping him mid-stride, "that man has a seat tonight, same as you. He's on the guest list." Kyle turned, face tilted in mock confusion. "You serious? He looks like he's here for the free coffee and shelter." Rachel didn't smile. "He's a veteran. You might want to save the jokes." Kyle raised his hands in fake surrender. All right, just making conversation." But his eyes followed the man again, watched him slowly shuffle down the hallway toward the auditorium, his steps oddly precise despite the wear in his boots. Inside the auditorium, velvet seats filled with donors, veterans, and community leaders. The stage was lit in soft gold, and a giant screen showed a loop of photos from past military initiatives. Laughter mingled with the clinking of glasses, floated through the air. It was a night meant to celebrate. Tom Granger didn't look like celebration. He kept his hands in his pockets, his head slightly down as if trying to stay out of the way, but every movement was deliberate, controlled. He made his way to the far end of the 3rd row and sat alone, his back straight as a rod. No one greeted him. A few glanced his way and turned back to their conversations. Kyle, seated just a few rows behind, leaned toward his date. "I swear, if that guy starts panhandling mid-speech, I'm walking out." His date, a woman with bored eyes and an expensive necklace, laughed, not because she found it funny, but because she didn't want to disagree. On stage, Rachel moved behind the curtain and found the coordinator reviewing note cards. "We're still missing 2 speakers," the coordinator said. Rachel's eyes scanned the names. One name made her pause. "Granger's here," she said. The coordinator raised a brow. "Tom Granger? Seriously?" Rachel nodded. 3rd row, far left. The coordinator whistled under her breath. "No one told me he was attending." Rachel crossed her arms. "That's the idea." Back in the audience, the program began. Speeches from local officials. A pre-recorded video from a senator. Then came the slideshow of past honorees. Tom Granger watched without flinching. His fingers, scarred and stained, rested quietly on the chair's armrest. One by one, names were read aloud. Kyle leaned back in his seat, half listening, until he heard something that made his jaw tighten. The MC's voice rang out, "And tonight, we are proud to honor a man whose name may not appear in your textbooks, but whose actions saved lives most of us will never hear about. Staff Sergeant Thomas Granger, United States Army, 1st Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group." Silence. Chairs creaked as heads turned. People who'd ignored him earlier now stared. Kyle's face drained. The man in the ragged coat stood slowly, and the spotlight caught the edges of something tucked beneath his collar, the faint shimmer of a bronze star pin, barely visible beneath worn fabric. The MC continued, her voice a mix of reverence and disbelief. Decorated for valor during Operation Anvil, Granger led a 7-man team through enemy territory to rescue trapped allies during a failed extraction. He never told his story. Until tonight. Applause started, tentative at first. Then it swelled. Not polite, not automatic. It was the kind of clapping that reached down into your chest. Tom didn't bow, didn't smile. He just nodded once and sat down. Kyle couldn't move. His mouth opened, then closed. His date leaned in, whispering, "Wasn't that the guy you said?" Kyle said nothing. His fingers gripped the arms of his chair. Behind them, Rachel stood near the wall, arms folded, watching the shift. She didn't smile, but her eyes gleamed. And for the first time all night, the room stood still. The gala carried on like any other. Finger foods, wine glasses clinking, surface-level conversations conducted over smooth jazz and carefully practiced smiles. But the room had changed. Thomas Granger sat exactly as he had before his name was announced. Same posture, same quiet. And yet now everyone looked at him like a stranger, wearing a mask they had just realized they couldn't see through. Their laughter had gone hollow. Their conversations were more cautious. Even Kyle's entourage was less raucous. Kyle stood near the refreshments table now, nursing his second bourbon like it owed him answers. "He didn't look like a hero," he muttered, voice low, almost hoping someone would push back. A man next to him, David Harlow, an Air Force vet who ran a regional supply chain, raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly does a hero look like, son?" Kyle didn't answer. He looked away, but David kept staring, unblinking, until Kyle shifted and mumbled something about "just saying." Rachel was at the far end of the room, adjusting a mic stand near the back doors, watching it all unfold. She'd seen this before. How fast the temperature dropped when a hidden truth stepped out into the light, especially a truth wrapped in worn boots and stitched with old scars. Meanwhile, Tom rose quietly from his seat and made his way toward a table near the wall. Still away from the others, still invisible by choice, but this time people noticed his movement. Some watched him with curiosity, others with guilt. A few avoided looking at him at all. As he reached the table, a man with thick glasses and a glint of awkward admiration in his expression hesitated before speaking. "Excuse me, sir, were you really part of Operation Anvil?" Tom glanced at the man, nodded once, then poured himself a cup of water. "I read about that," the man said, words rushing out now. "There was a piece in Task and Purpose a few years back, about a lost team that never made it out until, well, it just said they were rescued by an unidentified unit." Tom didn't smile, but his voice was calm. "That was us." More people drifted closer now, slowly, as though gravity had shifted toward him. Rachel finally stepped in, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Excuse me a moment to speak," she asked softly. Tom looked at her. She wasn't asking for a performance, it was a choice. He nodded once. A few minutes later, the MC returned to the mic, tapping it gently. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention one more time. We've invited Staff Sergeant Granger to share a few words. This was not planned, but sometimes the best moments are the ones we don't prepare for." Polite applause, then silence. Tom walked to the podium with the same unhurried stride that had carried him through war zones, airports, bus stations, and shelters. He stood behind the microphone, his rough hands gripping the sides gently. No note cards, no teleprompter, just a worn-down man with a lifetime behind his eyes. He cleared his throat once. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," he began, his voice low, textured by age and gravel. "Truth be told, I wasn't even planning to come inside. Thought I'd just collect the ticket, sit in the back, and slip out before anyone noticed." A few chuckles. Uneasy, but genuine. "I don't like being noticed much anymore," he continued. "There was a time I had to be invisible to survive, and somewhere along the line, I guess I forgot how to stop." He paused, looking out over the crowd. "I wore this coat," he said, tugging lightly at his tattered army jacket, "in places that don't show up on maps. I've lost men in it, bled in it, slept under bridges with it, been asked to take it off in diners because it made people uncomfortable. But I keep it on because, well, sometimes it's the only part of me that still feels like me." Silence again. Even the caterers stopped moving. "Some of you looked right through me tonight," he said, not with accusation, but with steady fact. "I've gotten used to that. Been ignored more times than I can count. Doesn't hurt the way it used to, mostly." He looked down at the podium, then back up. "You see, we come back with stories," he said, "but most of the time, we're not asked to tell 'em. People say, 'Thank you for your service,' like it's punctuation. But then they keep walking." A few heads lowered. Kyle, in the back, suddenly found the pattern in the carpet more interesting than anything else in the room. "But the stories don't go away," Tom said. "They sit inside you, like a second heartbeat. Quiet, relentless. And if you don't speak them, they start speaking for you." Now people were listening in full. No glancing at phones, no shuffling in seats. Tom took a deep breath. "I lost my best friend on the 3rd day of Anvil. His name was Eli Martinez. He bled out in a ditch while I was covering his flank. I remember the exact sound he made. I remember what he said with his last breath. I remember how light he got when the soul left his body. And I've carried that with me every day for 27 years. He looked out again, eyes glinting with something that wasn't sadness, but wasn't peace either. "When people ask me why I'm quiet, why I live out of a duffel, why I don't own a home or care much for dinners like this," he exhaled through his nose, slow, "it's because I'm still walking out of that ditch." And then he smiled, just slightly. "But tonight, I heard someone say my name. Loud, clear, like it mattered." He nodded toward Rachel. "And that made something shift in me." He stepped away from the podium. The room was still as glass. Then someone stood, a man in uniform, then another, then a woman in a wheelchair with a navy pin on her blazer, then more, until the whole room was on their feet. Not clapping, just standing. And silent. Honoree. Kyle stayed seated at first. His fingers gripped the edge of the table. Then he slowly rose, not because it felt right, because it felt necessary. Tom walked back to his seat, nodding quietly at those who now looked him in the eye. Rachel met him halfway, handing him a small pin in a velvet box. "We wanted to give this to you during the program," she whispered, "but I think you gave something better instead." Tom nodded. "I just told the truth." She smiled, and that was enough. The silence from the gala didn't follow Tom out of the building. Outside, the night air was alive with crickets, car engines, and a few distant laughs drifting from a nearby pub. But for Tom, it was still quiet inside. A deeper quiet, the kind that settles in when something long buried surfaces, gasping for air. He hadn't meant to speak. He never did. Yet now, every step he took down the sidewalk felt heavier, like the world had tilted ever so slightly under his boots. Rachel caught up to him halfway down the block, her heels clicking against the pavement. "You heading far?" she asked. Tom stopped, turned halfway, and offered a tired smile. "Just back to the shelter." Rachel winced, not out of pity, but recognition. She'd worked with vets long enough to know that once the crowds disappeared, so did the support. A standing ovation didn't feed you. It didn't put walls around your bed. "I can drive you," she offered. Tom shook his head. "I walk, most nights. Helps me sleep." Rachel stood beside him, her breath fogging in the cool air. "Well," she said, glancing down, "you moved 'em tonight. I've never seen a room go that still." Tom gave a light chuckle, barely more than breath. "People listen better when you don't ask 'em to." She nodded. They stood like that for a while, two silhouettes at the edge of a noisy world. "You know," Rachel said, "I looked you up after the MC read your name. There's barely anything online, just fragments, old citations. A couple articles that mention your unit in passing." Tom's gaze didn't waver. "Good. Wedding. Because the men I served with are ghosts now," he replied. "And ghosts don't need their names and lights. They need peace." Rachel didn't argue. She could tell he wasn't being poetic. He meant it. "You ever want to share more of your story," she said gently, "even if it's just to someone listening, not a room full of donors?" "I'm around." Tom nodded, then tipped his head respectfully and turned back toward the street. He walked another 20 blocks before the shelter came into view. A squat brick building tucked behind an old church, its front light buzzing faintly above a worn green door. Inside, the same faces as always. Tired men, hunched shoulders, plastic trays of food. The air carried the faint smell of boiled cabbage and bleach. Tom checked in with the front desk, gave a quiet evening, and found his cot near the back wall. He lay down without undressing, arms folded across his chest. The medal Rachel had given him was still in his pocket. He hadn't opened the box. Not yet. Across town, Kyle Brewster sat in the back seat of a luxury SUV, the interior dimly lit by the dash glow. His father sat beside him, talking into a Bluetooth headset, some conversation about stock returns and board votes. Kyle didn't listen. He kept hearing that voice. "I'm still walking out of that ditch. I wouldn't leave him." "Dad," Kyle said, suddenly interrupting the call. The older Brewster held up a hand, still mid-sentence. Kyle waited, impatient, until finally his father ended the call with a curt, "I'll call you back." "What?" his father asked, glancing at him. "Dead tonight," Kyle said. "Granger." "Did you know who he was?" Mr. Brewster leaned back, adjusting his cufflinks. "Not really. I knew he was on the guest list, old Special Forces guy, medal citations. Rachel wanted him there." Kyle nodded slowly. "We laughed at him." His father didn't react. "We mocked him," Kyle continued. "At the door, I said he looked like he wandered in for the coffee." "Then maybe keep your mouth shut next time," his father replied calmly. Kyle blinked. "You're not mad?" "I'm not here to be mad. I'm here to teach you not to be stupid in public. You're lucky no one recorded it. Bad optics." Kyle stared at the window, the city blurring past. "The man's a war hero," he said. His father shrugged. "And he's still sleeping in a cot tonight. You think life's fair, Kyle? It's not. It's just business. Always has been." The car turned onto their street, winding past gated homes and soft-lit porches. "But maybe," Mr. Brewster added, almost as an afterthought, "you should write him a letter. Something public. People like when the rich pretend they're humble." Kyle didn't respond, because deep down a flicker of guilt, wrong, unfamiliar, was stirring into something sharper, something close to shame. Morning came with the sound of coughing and clanging trays. Tom sat up slowly, stretched the stiffness from his back, and pulled on his coat. Outside, the streets shimmered with dew. Pigeons scattered as he walked toward the nearest veteran outreach office. He didn't visit often, didn't like the bureaucracy. But something Rachel said had stayed with him. He moved them. Inside the office, the walls were lined with posters. Suicide hotlines, job boards, counseling schedules. A woman behind the desk smiled as he approached. "Can I help you, sir?" Tom cleared his throat. "Need to check on a few benefits. File update?" She handed him a clipboard. He filled it out slowly, deliberately, every word a weight. Name, Thomas Granger. D.O.B., January 17, 1965. Branch, U.S. Army, Special Forces. Status, unhoused. Service-connected disabilities, yes. Seeking reinstatement, housing referral, work program. The woman took the form back with a nod. "We can start your reactivation process this week," she said. "It'll take a few appointments, but we can fast-track the housing part. Are you connected to any local resources?" Party? Tom hesitated. Maybe. She smiled again. Let's make sure. He left the office an hour later with 2 appointment cards, a small packet of info, and a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Not from the system, from being seen, from being listened to. He still hadn't opened the box with the medal, but tonight, maybe he would. Maybe. As he turned the corner onto Maple and 3rd, he noticed a newspaper box near the curb. The front page headline made him stop mid-stride. Silence no more. Gala honors homeless veterans' heroism. Below it, a grainy photo of him at the podium. He stared at it for a long while. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out the velvet box, and opened it with both hands. Bronze. Simple. Elegant. He ran his thumb across the engraving. Then he smiled. And for the first time in a long time, Tom Granger didn't feel invisible. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the Civic Center lobby again, but this time it wasn't just a scent. It was a signal. Another event was setting up, though this one was smaller, fewer suits, more uniforms. It wasn't a gala, it was a gathering. Tom Granger stood outside the side door, watching quietly as volunteers arranged folding chairs in a semicircle. A hand-painted sign read, Veterans Resilience and Recognition Forum. There were no velvet ropes, no catered hors d'oeuvres, no donor name tags. Just people, some in fatigue, some in plain clothes, a few in wheelchairs, all of them watching the setup with cautious hope. Tom hadn't planned to come back, not here, not so soon. But Rachel had called him 2 days ago. Her voice was lighter than he remembered. They asked for you, she'd said. Specifically, they want to hear you again. He'd hesitated, then said nothing for a while. And this time, she'd added softly, it's not about medals or spotlights. It's about them, the ones like you. That's why he came. Rachel spotted him as she came through the front doors, juggling a clipboard and a tote bag. Her face lit up when she saw him. Tom, she called. He nodded as she approached, her smile unguarded and warm. You look taller, she said, teasing. I slept in a bed last night, Tom replied, deadpan. She raised her brows. No kidding? He held up a keycard. VA housing referral came through. Little unit over on Jefferson, hot water and a working heater. That's amazing, she said, genuinely. Tom nodded. Feels strange. Rachel touched his elbow gently. You aren't strange. Let it feel good. A few minutes later, chairs filled with veterans and local volunteers. The lights were soft, the mood subdued but comfortable. There was no stage, just a small wooden platform and a single microphone. Tom didn't wait to be introduced. He stepped forward, his jacket freshly washed but still bearing the same patchwork of time and history. The room hushed as he approached the mic. He cleared his throat, but he didn't look nervous this time. He looked ready. Most of you weren't in that room last week, he began. But maybe you heard about it. Maybe someone told you a story about a guy who stood up and said too much. Polite laughter, heads nodded. Well, I didn't say it for applause. I said it because I needed to remember what it felt like to matter. And sometimes, remembering helps others do the same. He looked around the room. Faces looked back, some stoic, some glassy-eyed, all listening. We carry a lot, he said. Guilt, memories, names of people no one else remembers, and the world moves on like we're scenery in someone else's movie. Tom took a slow breath. But not here. Not today. A pause. Then he stepped back. Applause came, not explosive, but grounding, like rain after a long drought. Tom nodded once and returned to his seat. The rest of the event moved quickly. Veterans shared stories. Some barely spoke above whispers. Others wept. A young woman who had served in Kuwait sang a quiet rendition of taps without accompaniment. An older man passed around a photo of his unit, all but 2 now gone. Near the end, Rachel returned to the front. There's someone else who wanted to say something, she said, her voice calm. he asked to be last. She looked toward the door. Kyle Brewster walked in, alone. No suit this time. Jeans, flannel, and a pair of shoes that hadn't touched marble in weeks. A ripple went through the crowd. Some stiffened, some squinted. Kyle stepped up to the mic and adjusted it awkwardly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said plainly. "I didn't come here to make myself feel better. I came here because I owe a man in this room an apology." He looked directly at Tom. "A week ago I saw a man standing in the corner of a room full of people, and I judged him. I thought he didn't belong, and then his name was read, and the room stopped breathing." Kyle swallowed hard. "But what really got me, what's haunted me since, wasn't his service record. It was that he'd been walking through life with people like me stepping over him for years." The room was silent now, eyes on Kyle, on Tom. Kyle reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is my public apology. I sent it to the local papers, and I attach a $100,000 0 cents personal donation to the city's Veterans Support Fund." Gasps scattered through the room. "I'm not saying that to brag," he added quickly. "I'm saying it because money is easy. What's hard is admitting you were blind on purpose." He looked at Tom again. "And I'm sorry." Kyle stepped down, sat in the back row, said nothing else. Tom didn't move. Not at first. Then slowly he stood. He didn't walk toward Kyle. He didn't make a speech. He just nodded once. And in that nod, a peace passed between them. Not full forgiveness, maybe not yet, but a step forward. After the forum, people milled around, sharing numbers, hugs, stories. Tom stayed near the edge, as usual, but he wasn't alone. A teenager came up to him, a wiry boy in a hoodie with nervous energy. "My dad said you saved lives," the boy said, "in the war." Tom looked at him. "Your dad served?" The boy nodded. "He never talks about it, but he told me about you." Tom thought for a second, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box. He handed it to the boy. The kid blinked. "I can't take this." "You're not taking it," Tom said. "You're holding it until you understand what it really means." The boy opened the box slowly, reverently. Tom smiled for real this time. As people began to leave, Rachel approached again, coat slung over her arm. "You coming to the diner?" she asked. "Bunch of us are grabbing food." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think I will." As they walked together down the steps of the Civic Center, a breeze stirred the leaves on the sidewalk. It was soft, easy, like the world had decided, just for now, to stop rushing. And for the first time in years, Tom Granger didn't feel like a man walking out of a ditch. He felt like a man who had finally come home.